All right, guys, welcome back to the Pocket Mads channel. It's Maddie here, and welcome back to Meta Monday, the weekly series where we analyze the Pokemon Pocket metagame and keep you guys up to date on everything going on in the competitive world of Pokemon Pocket. A really special episode today because it's the first meta report of the new season. That's right. This past weekend, a ton of tournaments went on, including PMPT number 22. It was the first weekend of competitive play where, we had all of these new cards from Paldean Wonders. And I will say that late last week when we were kind of talking about the set, talking about the new cards, a lot of people had some interesting reactions about this set. I think a lot of people, maybe their gut reaction wasn't super positive about this new set. However, I will say a lot of these new cards are extremely strong and the metagame is looking very different. So there's an absolute ton to talk about today. PMPT number 22, over 550 players came out to compete in our tournament this past weekend. Was a ton of fun. We did have Lucky Ice Pop banned. Some people were happy about it. Some people weren't so happy about it. But I do think that it created a really great environment to, see all of the new decks and all of the new cards compete and interact. So in today's video, we're going to do something a little bit different. One, because we banned Lucky Ice Pop, some people have expressed that they think that the results of the tournament might not be, the most accurate reflection of, the metagame as it is currently right now, right? In other tournaments. And if, ranked isn't out, but if we had ranked, of course, Lucky Ice Pop would be legal. So I do agree with that to an extent. I also disagree to some extent, but it's all good. So what we're going to do in today's video is not only break down the results of our tournament this past weekend, we're going to talk about the deck lists. We're also going to talk about the metagame and the data as things are currently as a whole right now throughout this entire season of tournament play. Again, 19 tournaments so far have seen played over 3,000 players, over 7,000 matches. So we have a decent sample size of things that are going on right now. So we're going to break down everything in its entirety. We always talk about it, especially on like the Wednesday video series, but our tournament on the weekends isn't the only tournament that sees play. It's not the only reflection of the metagame. I say it all the time, every week. It's the truth now. It'll be the truth in the future. So we're going to go ahead and highlight data from all over the place. But before we get into today's Meta Monday and we break down the results and the data, what we're going to do is talk about what's happening this upcoming weekend, because it's actually a really big deal. This is really important, so you guys got to go ahead and listen here. There will be no PMPT tournament this next weekend. I don't know, I forget, a week from now. This Saturday or Sunday. We're not doing a PMPT tournament. That's because we're going to be partnering and pairing up with PGL for an absolutely insane 30th Pokemon anniversary tournament. The biggest Pokemon Pocket tournament in history is what they're calling it. It's going to be absolutely massive, guys. Link to register to this tournament will be down in the description below. We will be casting and live streaming this whole tournament on the Pocket Mads YouTube channel. So if you want to tune in and watch, you can still go ahead and watch on the Pocket Mads channel where you're at right now. This tournament here has $1,500 US dollar cash prize pool. Not only that, but they are raffling off 30 Professor's Researches, full art oaks to all of the people that are going to be participating in the tournament. So it's a really massive deal. Again, this is going to be Saturday, March 7th. It starts at 10 a.m. instead of noontime like we normally start on Saturdays. That's Eastern time, but definitely go and register. There is a code you need to register, but you can just grab it for free. It's over on PGL's Discord server. So you got to go ahead, hop in their Discord server, and you can grab the code to register. This is going to be an absolutely massive event. I'm super happy that they're going to be doing this. So we're going to be pairing up with them. I might even play in it, who knows, but I'm really excited. So we're going to have our casting team. We're going to have Jay and Taj on the Pocket Mads YouTube channel casting the entire tournament. So it's going to be a ton of fun. Definitely go register, guys. They've been, investing heavily into this prize pool. So I really think that everybody, if you have the time, should go and compete for this tournament because it's going to be absolutely incredible. So definitely go check it out. Link to register down in the description below. Super excited. Very excited. Okay, so let's get into Meta Monday. I know that was a very long intro. We'll put timestamps down below if you guys want to navigate throughout the video. What we're going to do is break down the final standings of our tournament. We're going to talk about the deck lists, and then what we're going to do is actually pivot over to the overall metagame tab for the season so far, and that's where we're going to break down the data. And here we go. Here are the standings from PMPT number 22 this past weekend, guys. This is what it's looking like. So yes, Suicune and Baxcalibur does get first place. This is kind of the brand new, most popular deck. And basically every tournament you're going to see, a ton of people are playing this deck. It's kind of the new way to play Suicune. Very strong deck list. Second place, Jacob J. And this is Bixie, by the way, from Singapore. Shout out to Bixie. Jacob J. from the United States. Second place, made it all the way to grand finals playing Magro. That's right. Magnezone aggro with Heliolisk. A very interesting result here. He had an absolutely phenomenal run, made it all the way to grand finals. Gardevoir, what the Sigma, playing Gardevoir from the United States, third place with Mega Gardevoir Meloetta in final four and top four here, third place, super fun. And then we have one cool bro from India playing Magnezone Oricorio. We have Light DN, who got just in top 8, 5th place here with Greninja Oricorio. And then 6th place, we have the new Bellibolt Zeraora. 7th place, we have that Mega Altaria Greninja deck list. 8th place, another Bellibolt Leaf here. In 9th place, another Magnezone Oricorio deck. Einstein, 10th place here, Bellibolt. Mendez from Brazil, 11th place, playing Bellibolt and Magnezone. And then we see the lone Hydreigon here. Again, no Ice Pops, so Hydreigon, 12th place, Robs from Brazil, shout out to him. And a couple more Baxcalibur, Suicune decks, a couple more Altaria decks. We had a Mimikyu Greninja in 18th place, which is pretty cool. We had a Leafeon Ogerpon deck in 22nd place. And then again, a lot more Bellibolt. So that's the final standings of the tournament this weekend. I will say that because we banned Lucky Ice Pop, again, we didn't ban Hydreigon. We allowed everybody to play any deck they wanted to, but we banned Lucky Ice Pop. And coherently, what that did was it made it so a lot of people just chose not to play Hydreigon. That wasn't really our intention. We didn't want to just like push Hydreigon out of the meta. I think Hydreigon is still a very, very, very strong deck, even without Lucky Ice Pop. And none of the other decks were able to play Lucky Ice Pop as well. So it's interesting. I think that with the Ice Pop ban and all of the new cards, I think a lot of people just chose not to play Hydreigon, which is fair. I think Hydreigon was only about 3% of the total meta share this weekend, which definitely changed the entire landscape of the metagame. I think that's a big reason why we saw multiple Magnezone decks very high up in the standings. Magnezone is a very, very strong deck, whether you're playing it with, Heliolisk or Oricorio or Bellibolt, any of the ways that you play Magnezone, very, very strong, especially when there's not so much Hydreigon in the format. So that was definitely a big reason here. I think same with Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir is very underrated, a very, very strong Pokemon. That deck list has always been quite good. But unfortunately, last season, Hydreigon was everywhere, so Gardevoir really wasn't able to kind of spread its wings and be super effective, and that's why I think, really cool that we saw What the Sigma bring Gardevoir all the way to top 4. We love to see that. Definitely really, really cool. Again, lots of Bellibolt. Bellibolt and I would say Chien-Pao. Those are kind of the two new archetypes, although the Suicune deck with Chien-Pao is different than Suicune and Greninja. It's kind of taken over its spot in the metagame. It plays very similarly. We'll break down exactly what's going on there with Suicune and Baxcalibur and Chien-Pao, but that's a very, very strong deck list. It has all of the advantages that Suicune and Greninja had from previous seasons, but it's maybe just a little bit better into some more common matchups right now. We'll break it all down in today's video, but tons of Bellibolt. I think that the best way to play Bellibolt still to me is going to be like an aggressive sort of high roll version of Bellibolt, which is with Zeraora. Definitely one of the best performing decks this weekend and in other tournaments as well. So shout out to Bellibolt. Yeah, I mean, only one Hydreigon here, 12th place Robs. Again, I think that if more people played Hydreigon, it would have been way more popular, or I guess it would have been way more present in the final standings. I really don't think Hydreigon was bad at all, even without Ice Pop. I think people just chose not to play it, which is fair. And to be honest, if you take a look at the metagame from all of the other tournaments this weekend, and probably today as well, Monday as I'm recording this, Hydreigon is seeing a massive decrease in play, even in the tournaments that are playing Lucky Ice Pop. This is very interesting, but I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think that some of the new cards and new decks that have emerged in this new metagame are actually quite strong into Hydreigon, even when it has access to Lucky Ice Pop. So I don't think that the Ice Pop ban was like the only reason not a lot of people played Hydreigon. Again, Suicune with Baxcalibur and Chien-Pao has a very, very good matchup into Hydreigon. And then Bellibolt as well is able to basically one-hit KO Hydreigons very easily and live attack. So I don't think that the meta right now is nearly as favorable towards Hydreigon, regardless of whether Ice Pop is banned or not. Again, you guys can sort of interpret what you want to, but the results of our tournament this weekend are actually very reflective, and the metagame is actually very reflective of other tournaments as well that did not have Lucky Ice Pop banned. So again, but we're going to cover the metagame in total over the past weekend. So let's get into it. So let's talk about the deck lists, right? The number one deck list of the tournament was Bixie here, first place, Suicune Baxcalibur. However, you will notice that there wasn't another Suicune Baxcalibur until 14th place here. And this was by far the most played deck of our tournament. So let's break down the deck list here. Again, first place finish, but no other appearances until we get to 14th place, which is very rare. You don't always see that. definitely interesting. Let's take a look here at the deck list. And I would say that this is definitely a very standard way that people are playing this deck list. This is the new Suicune. You need to understand, Suicune is absolutely insane. When I first saw Baxcalibur and I saw Chien-Pao, I said, this doesn't really make that much sense, quite frankly, because Chien-Pao here has 3 energies in its attack cost, and Baxcalibur isn't able to set Chien-Pao up in one turn unless you have double Baxcalibur on the bench. That's a very difficult thing to do. I don't think Chien-Pao is an overpowered Pokemon. I don't even think that it's that good of a Pokemon. However, we have Suicune EX, so it's very similar, I think, Chien-Pao in terms of like how I would rate this card to Mega Absol, which is definitely not a bad card. It's just not a great card, except that, you know, it's really good when you pair it with particular other cards in the game. Like I always make the joke that a Mega Absol gets carried by Hydreigon, which is true, but it's a really good card in that deck list. I think Chien-Pao is very similar. Just a one of here in a Suicune deck. Suicune is the card we want in the active spot. It's going to soak up a ton of damage. It's also going to deal a ton of damage, and it's going to draw a ton of cards. So it's the perfect partner for this type of strategy. Baxcalibur is in general just really nice, because if you go first and you lead Suicune, you can still attack on your second turn. So I think that the Baxcalibur Ice Maker ability is kind of underrated in that sense. Some decks play Misty. I don't think you really need Misty for this deck, although it does make it a little bit more explosive. You have that potential to go turn 2 Crystal Water attack with Suicune even on your first turn, which is a really, really big deal. And then, of course, just one Chien-Pao in the deck. And I think that when you're playing one Chien-Pao, it's not really making the deck any less consistent. It's just something that you can have on your board, and then once Suicune goes down, you go into Chien-Pao, and you just have the ability to hit for 130 anywhere on the board. And by the time you're going into Chien-Pao late in the game, you've probably drawn through your entire deck anyway, because Suicune is just drawing so many cards, which allows you to probably have a pretty good chance to get double Baxcalibur on the bench. One thing that's really apparent about these Suicune decks these days is starting planes comboed with Giant Cape. This brings Suicune up to 180 HP, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's also going to bring Chien-Pao up to 170 HP, which really does boost the viability of these cards. Makes them very, very difficult to 1-hit KO. Most of the time, they cannot get 1-hit KO'd. So again, a very, very, very solid strategy. I apologize to Chien-Pao. I guess I just didn't think that the Baxcalibur Chien-Pao combination would be better than Greninja as it was previously in Suicune decks. But, you know, I might be wrong about that. I mean, to be fair, it's doing very well, and there's not much Suicune and Greninja seeing play, which is very, very interesting. I think into, again, some more popular matchups, it's just kind of a better option, and I find that to be very, very fascinating. So, a new progression in the metagame. This is going to be, and I'm telling you right now, this is by far going to be the most played deck this season, so you need to prepare, okay? This is going to be the meta driver this season, whether you love it or you hate it. You're either playing this deck list or you're playing something that you think can beat this deck, okay? So that is where this deck will be positioned. I promise you, it will be the most played deck this season. Suicune back up on top. There is a lot of counterplay, though, to this strategy, so we'll break that all down here later in the video. This deck plays double Research, doesn't play any copycats, but it plays one Cyrus, one Guzma, one Irida, and one Mars. Compositionally, very similar to Suicune and Greninja back in the previous seasons, right? There's really not much different here. I will say that Guzma is a requirement for this deck because, as we know, Protective Poncho is going to completely nullify Chien-Pao's ability to hit the bench. So I think Guzma is a very, very smart decision. This deck does get countered by Poncho, so you got to play Guzma. It's your really only defense to other people's defense from Chien-Pao. Mars still always used to say Seaplane Suicune, and I think that's the correct choice. The one Cyrus is interesting to me because Chien-Pao hits the bench, but I think that Chien-Pao's damage alongside Cyrus means that we effectively have double copies of Cyrus. So I still like one copy of Cyrus, still, you know, kind of one of the primary win condition cards in the entire game. Maybe we end up swapping that Cyrus for something else, but I think it's probably still worth it to play one copy. And then, like I said, double Cape, double Rare Candy, double Star, and then one starting plane. A lot of decks, specifically Bellibolt, are going to want to play their own stadium to get rid of that starting planes to drop Suicune and Chien-Pao down 20 HP. That's going to be really, really relevant. Bellibolt can play Training Arena to hit up to 150. That's going to be relevant into a lot of matchups, but it also is going to be effectively a plus 30 damage into Suicune because you're going to be getting rid of their starting plane. So Bellibolt, we'll talk about it later in the video, but is actually positioned really strongly into this matchup. This is a very strong deck, but has been losing to Bellibolt, which is a very interesting development, I would say, this season. But anyway, guys, and also Irida. You got to play Irida because it's a broken card. And that's it, guys. It's Suicune Jianpao. I mean, this is the new way to play Suicune right now. Greninja kind of on the out. We are still seeing Greninja with Altaria, but either way, a very, very interesting development this new season. Suicune Baxcalibur getting first place at our tournament, winning other tournaments as well. One of the most dominant decks so far in this early season. And like I said, has a really good matchup into Hydreigon, which means that, quite frankly, Hydreigon might just be on the out. That just might be the reality of it. Second place was Jacob J. This is Magnezone Heliolisk. This is aggro Magnezone. We call it Magro. This deck plays one Volt Charge Magnezone, or Magneton rather, and then one of the new Spark Magneton that can be grabbed with Clement, right? And we're playing Clement's backpack. So, or it can't get grabbed. I know it can't. I mean, you grab a Magneton, Heliolisk, and Clement's backpack, right? So Clement's backpack boosts the damage of Magneton and Heliolisk. Clement's backpack grabs all of these cards. So again, a very aggressive way to play Magnezone. Strategies like this always struggled because Hydreigon was so prominent, but as we know, Suicune kind of back on top, lots of water type, matchups that you're going to be hitting for weakness on. Heliolisk can hit for Thunderbolt. That's 120 with weakness is 140 with Clement's backpack. That's 160. Clement's backpack, that's 180. So, Heliolisk is going to be very, very good to be able to KO a Suicune early in the game, which is why I think that this deck list, honestly, was a really good call for this tournament. It also just doesn't have to worry about the other Oricorio decks that Magnezone oftentimes sees play with. So I think this was uniquely a really well-positioned deck this season. I don't think that Magnezone Heliolisk is going to end up being like a top-tier deck list. I think this weekend was a bit of an exception to that, but a very, very cool deck list nonetheless. This came out in Crimson Blaze when we got the whole Clement package and upgrade to Magnezone. So it's really cool to see it kind of relevant once again this season. That's one of the things that I really loved about this tournament was that we saw, the Magnezone Heliolisk package make it far in the tournament. We saw Gardevoir from last expansion make it far into this tournament. So very, very cool to see some decks that really are strong, but were kind of gatekept by Hydreigon have a chance back into the metagame. And like I said, guys, I mean, Hydreigon will continue to see some play. It's definitely not going to disappear completely, but this is not Hydreigon's season anymore. I would be very, very surprised if Hydreigon ended back up as the #1 most played deck by the end of the season. But keep in mind, this tournament specifically had less Hydreigon than normal. I don't know if Hydreigon will dip all the way down to 3% throughout the rest of the season, but this tournament, there wasn't many Hydreigon, so it definitely changed the landscape of the metagame. But a very, very cool deck. A deck that ended up losing to Suicune Baxcalibur in Grand Finals, but probably has a pretty decent matchup into that particular deck. So next up is What the Sigma here in third place. Gardevoir, Mega Gardevoir, probably the best placement we've ever seen for Mega Gardevoir. No surprise that it came in a tournament where not a lot of people were playing Hydreigon, which again, I do love. This is not a bad deck. I tried to tell people so many times when Gardevoir was releasing that this is not a bad card. The strategy is very strong. It's just not very well positioned, and it wasn't well positioned at all throughout all of last season. This season's kind of the exception to that, quite frankly. I think that Mega Gardevoir has a lot of potential. It really does. It's not a bad strategy whatsoever. Mega Gardevoir does 110 damage. It doesn't 1-hit KO much, but it does 2-hit KO virtually everything. 210 HP with Diantha. That means it's very, very difficult to 2-hit KO Gardevoir. And again, very relevant in a format where there's not a lot of Hydreigon because Gardevoir always got 2-hit KO'd by Hydreigon, and Hydreigon, of course, being a very fast-paced deck. So again, if Hydreigon dips in play, I think Gardevoir has a ton of potential. Definitely just a really strong deck. Nothing really stands out to me here. We are playing the Xerneas to be able to KO Oricorios and deal with Oricorios quite well, but it also hits for 120 damage if it's at full HP, which is just a lot of damage, quite frankly. Very easy to set this up with Gardevoir, so it's a very nice card in the Gardevoir package. Meloetta is our leadoff to draw a bunch of Psychic Pokemon and move through our deck very quickly. Peculiar Plaza gives all of our Pokemon free retreat, which is really nice. One Cyrus, double Ricani, double Pokeball, and then one May. So May is kind of the consistency card here, which I think I also like in the sense that we are playing multiple Pokemon and multiple evolutions of Pokemon. May is just a really nice card in certain strategies. And yeah, guys, nothing else to really say about Mega Gardevoir. It was sort of maybe a one-off, performance this weekend. Who knows? But if Hydreigon, again, is a deck that doesn't see nearly as much play this season, I think Gardevoir has a ton of potential. I really, really believe that. It's just a strong strategy. It really is. It's just sometimes, it doesn't care. Like, Charizard doesn't care about Gardevoir, right? Hydreigon doesn't care about Gardevoir. But if those decks aren't seeing play, Gardevoir's got a ton of potential, so it's something we need to look out for, okay? I'm not saying it'll take over the metagame this season, but I definitely think that it's kind of underrated and probably a little bit better this season. Fourth place, we have one cool bro from India. This is Magnezone Oricorio. And yet again, guys, all of these decks aren't playing Lucky Ice Pop, but to be fair, you could just literally replace certain cards in these decks with Lucky Ice Pop, and then that's just how it goes. The thing about Lucky Ice Pop is that it wasn't exclusive to Hydreigon. Like, a ton of different decks played it, and getting rid of Lucky Ice Pop made the tournament flow a lot better. It made all of these matchups and all of these decks way less RNG focused, and I think a lot of people had a better time with it. Again, when we get into the next season and this next weekend, when we cover the results, I'm sure some of the decks will slot in Lucky Ice Pop, and when Ranked comes out, we will be reflecting that in the decks that we showcase, of course. That's 100% the case. But we have a couple of weeks till Ranks comes out, so, you know, at the end of the day, these decks are going to change regardless in 2 weeks from now, so you're just going to have to go ahead and wait to see what happens. But this is Magnezone and Oricorio. And again, Oricorio and Magnezone in general, both two strategies that are much, much more relevant when Hydreigon isn't all over the metagame, which I think is a really good thing. I really do. Now, the Suicune Baxcalibur deck can kind of just beat Oricorio pretty easily. Baxcalibur just won at KOs, and it's got a ton of HP. Also, not even weak to Lightning. So, Baxcalibur, Suicune can kind of get around Oricorio pretty easily. Bellibolt as well either plays Magnezone or plays Zeraora. Those are definitely pretty strong options into Oricorio as well. So, at the end of the day, I don't know if Oricorio is going to end up being that relevant, but this tournament in particular, Oricorio definitely was a much better choice with less Hydreigon. This deck list, very standard. I don't think there's really any surprise here. Just kind of very standard Magnezone Oricorio in a deck list that, again, we didn't get to see a lot of last season, whether you thought that was a good thing or a bad thing. Just with a ton of Hydreigon, this was not a very viable deck. So it's nice to see Magnezone Oricorio possibly having more of an opportunity this season. I would love to see that because I think Oricorio is very healthy for the metagame. In 5th place, we have the other way to play Oricorio, which is Light DN's 5th place deck. This is Greninja Oricorio, which is playing Kangaskhan. So again, you know, Mega Kangaskhan with Greninja with Oricorio. This was a strategy that was fairly present last season. Although I think a lot of people kind of swapped off the Oricorio version of Kangaskhan in favor of like the Darkrai version. Both are strong deck lists, quite frankly. I think Kangaskhan is still a good card. Greninja is still a good card as well. But like I said, less Hydreigon means that Oricorio was a little bit more viable. Nothing too shocking about this deck list. Nothing's really changed in terms of any of the new cards. Again, there's some, like the two cards that released in Paldean Wonders that I think could be played in any deck, like Arven and Mesagosa. Those are cards that not many decks have played. I think most people don't like the concept of Mesagosa and the fact that you can give your opponent the opportunity to find a Pokemon, and that's very relatable. I totally understand that. I think Arven's actually not a bad card and probably should be explored a little bit more, but neither of those cards are really seeing that much play in a competitive setting. So a deck list like this, not really playing any of the new cards, but it's a deck that, again, I think most people are pretty familiar with, right? This is the new way that people are playing Greninja Oricorio. Always has been one of the most effective control decks in the game, and something that is traditionally always very good into Suicune and Greninja. Although Suicune and Greninja, not really seeing any play anymore. So very interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. In 6th place is going to be our top Bellibolt deck. So Bellibolt didn't make it that far, didn't make it into top 4, but tons of Bellibolts were very, very successful this tournament. So we had 3 Bellibolts, Zeraoras here in top 10, 6th place, 8th place, and 10th place. Let's take a look at Elmada Dorpero's Peru's deck. I can't say the names, I apologize, from Peru. 6th place, Bellibolt and Zeraora. I think Bellibolt is him. I think that Bellibolt is very, very strong. It's important to note that, again, a lot of people are going to be playing Suicune this season. It is just sort of the new most popular deck, and Bellibolt does really well into that matchup. Let's talk about this deck list a little bit, because there's a lot of things that I think will change about this particular style of Bellibolt. And the disadvantage that I think Bellibolt's going to have this season, I've said it before, is that because there's so many different ways that you can play Bellibolt, I don't think there's going to be one, like, you know, fully agreed upon way to play it. So its meta shares are going to be broken up a little bit. That typically is a disadvantage when it comes to decks popularities, because certain decks that just have like one way to play them just become a little bit more popular. That's just the very nature of like how the metagames work. So anyway, this is what I would consider to be the best way to play Bellibolt, which is not with Magnezone, it's with Zeraora. This deck list is interesting. We're playing 1 Sabrina, 1 Cyrus, double Copycat, double Pokeball, double Research. Those are all things that you're always going to see in this deck. Of course, double Tadbulb, double Zeraora. This deck list does not play Elemental Switch, which is something that I still feel very strongly is very good in Bellibolt. What Elemental Switch does when you pair it with Zeraora is it allows you to attack with Bellibolt on your second turn if you go first. Bellibolt without Elemental Switch is a purely going second deck list, which, you know, is still strong. It plays a lot like Mega Altaria, but into certain strategies, it's really not that good. So I think that Elemental Switch is still something I'm very much in favor of. This deck is playing double Rocky Helmets and Training Arena, so it's going for like maximum damage output. But I really don't think that stuff's that necessary, quite frankly. I think that Training Arena and Bellibolt adds up to 150 with weakness is 170 on Suicune, so it's just going to end up KOing a Suicune regardless, as well as a Qianpao. Qianpao's never able to, because when you play Training Arena, it gets rid of starting planes. So you don't need Rocky Helmets to deal enough damage to KO either Suicune EX or Qianpao EX. And it also allows you to want to KO Hydreigon. So I don't really think Rocky Helmet is that needed for Bellibolt. You could play Heavy Helmet in Bellibolt, and I think that strategy could be very, very fun to reduce the damage you take by 20 when you pair that in conjunction with a lucky Ice Pop. So again, I think that the Bellibolt decks need a lot of refinement. I think that we've yet to really settle on a proper deck. I'm still very high on Elemental Switch. This deck plays one Pichu. I'm also not a big fan of Pichu, but I don't think it's terrible in the deck list. That, again, is really the only way that you would be able to attack with Bellibolt on your second turn going first, is if you lead Pichu and go first and get Tadbulb and get Bellibolt. And that's kind of the, I guess the strategy that this player was using, was playing Pichu and whatnot. The cool thing about Pichu, though, is it does allow you to maybe go second and hit for that 140 more often. But again, you have to lead Pichu. And now we are playing X speed alongside it. Maybe that's the sauce. Who knows? I really don't think Pichu's that needed in the deck. I think if you play Elemental Switch, you don't have to worry about playing Pichu or X speed. You can just sort of run with whatever's in the active spot. Electric Generator, he's only playing one copy of. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that, well, I guess maybe with Pichu, you don't really need it. But the opportunity of you leading off with Pichu is quite low with only one copy of it in the deck. So there's a lot of things that I would change personally about this deck list, but this was the highest placing Bellibolt deck of the tournament. I think either way, Bellibolt's really good. I'm still high on Elemental Switch, but we'll have to really see what people end up playing. Rocky Helmet, I don't think is necessarily that needed. Maybe Rocky Helmet plus Training Arena is like 170, so it could be really good for Mega Absol. But at the end of the day, I'm not like the biggest of advocates for Rocky Helmet in general, but I think Bellibolt is phenomenal. So in a metagame this season where the Suicune decks are going to see a ton of play, Bellibolt is kind of the predominant like counter meta deck, and I think it will be extremely, extremely relevant. Again, tons of different ways that you can play Bellibolt. You can play it, as like a turbo deck. You could play it as like a high roll deck. You could play it with Magnezone to be a bit more consistent. You could even pair it with Oricorio. So many different ways you can play Bellibolt, which I think is a very big advantage of this Pokemon, but also a disadvantage when it comes to the consolidation of people playing, a single deck list, right? Anyway, that is the top Bellibolt deck. A lot here to talk about with Bellibolt. I think it'll change a lot in the upcoming weeks, but definitely really, really cool. In 7th place, we have Cyro's deck from Japan, and this is going to be Altaria, but with Chingling. So what we're seeing a lot of nowadays is instead of Chingling, we're playing Meowth. And the Meowth deck list here in this deck is so toxic. I don't even want to even think about that deck list, but you got to be prepared. Altaria Greninja is still, I think, at the moment, the best way to play Altaria. It is unfortunate because it turns a very consistent, fun Altaria type deck into basically just sort of high roll stuff, especially when you're playing Meowth. It really is just sort of a pure RNG type strategy. But this deck's playing Chingling, and I love Chingling. So you know what? I think this deck has a lot of potential. Chingling does a lot. Even in this metagame right now, Chingling's going to stop, Rare Candy for Suicune and Baxcalibur, so they can't go turn 2 Baxcalibur, which is really nice. It also always just stops Pokeball, right? So the big advantage that Mega Altaria had was that you could play Lycia and play Chingling and then stop other decks from being able to play Pokeball or Rare Candy turn 2, which was a really, really big deal. I still think Chingling is a great, great Pokemon. It unfortunately didn't see a ton of play last season, and that's because of, Poison Barb, Nihilego, and Hydreigon. They were able to just kind of effectively cancel out the Chingling stuff, which was really toxic. Suicune doesn't really have that ability, so I still think Chingling is a really, really great option. But of course, the new Meowth from last season, you could swap for Chingling and just play like a stall RNG coin flip deck, which is super toxic in general. This deck is playing one Mesagosa, which is kind of crazy. Again, I don't think Mesagosa is a bad card. I just think that a lot of people don't really want to play it because your opponent can also utilize it. But it is really nice to get rid of your opponent's stadium and in the same turn get a 50-50 chance at a Pokemon. So I think that Mesagosa is actually a good card. It's just not something I really expect a ton of people to want to play in their decks, quite frankly. But anyway, Altaria Greninja is still a top dog. I think it'll be extremely relevant in the season. I don't know if it'll see that much play. I think a lot of people are just tired of playing this type of deck, but this is, I think right now, not only the most premier and I guess best way to play Greninja this season, but the best way to play Altaria, which is kind of crazy. So again, Hydreigon is maybe on the outs this season, but Altaria Greninja is still around if you wanted to play like an RNG high roll type strategy, which is always quite interesting, quite frankly, always interesting. A lot of different decks down here. What we're going to do is hold off on talking about some of these decks for later in this week. On Wednesday's video, we'll break down some of the more niche decks that did well, not only in our tournament, but in other tournaments, over this first week of play, which is definitely going to be really fun. But anyway, that's the tournament. These are the overall standings. Again, lots of Suicune Baxcalibur, lots of Bellibolt here. We had 64 players exactly in day 2. A very, very fun metagame. So different than last season. It really is kind of crazy. We'll have to wait and see how just enjoyable the season is, how healthy this metagame ends up being. But one thing is for sure is that Paldean Wonders in these new cards definitely are drastically changing the metagame. So anyway, we're going to transition into the latter part of this video, which we always do, which is breaking down the metagame analysis and the data. So if you made it this far in the video, don't go anywhere, because the data and the information we're about to talk about is extremely relevant, and I think it's going to be very, very informative. So if you made it this far in the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment down below and say, hey, you know what? I made it this far. Shout out to you, Maddie. I appreciate it. Okay, so again, we could break down the metagame data for this tournament, specifically our tournament, but I think it makes more sense to break down the metagame data for this entire season so far. And that's what this tab is. So this is the entire season, all 19 tournaments so far, 3,000 players, 7,700 matches. So a pretty decent sample size in the first couple of days. Tons of different tournaments. You love to see it. So far, the #1 most played deck is Suicune and Baxcalibur at 13% and a 53.67% win rate. So absolutely phenomenal. I think we're approaching potentially into like tier 0 territory. Now, it's important to note that this data does also factor in the tournaments from like the first day and second day of the metagame, where, most people weren't even playing the new decks and there was a lot of Hydreigon running around, which is why we see Hydreigon as 10%, the second most played deck so far this season. But you need to understand that this Hydreigon deck and Hydreigon in general this season is trending down very, very, very quickly. Not many people are playing Hydreigon right now in the tournaments. If you go and check other tournaments today, tomorrow, and in the upcoming weeks, trust me, Hydreigon will be seeing a ton less play, and a ton of people will be playing Suicune Baxcalibur. So my expectation is if we tune back into this data a week from now, Hydreigon will have dropped a couple slots and Suicune will have gone up to probably close to about 20% meta share. I really think it will be by far the most played deck this season. Let's take a look at Suicune and Baxcalibur's matchups, because this is very, very important. It has a 47% win rate into Altaria and Greninja, so Altaria definitely still fairly strong into Suicune and Baxcalibur. It has a winning matchup, particularly, but let's take a look at its matchup into Bellibolt and Zeraora. Look at the 79 to 123. This means that Suicune beats Bellibolt only 38% of the time. This is a very, very poor win rate. So Bellibolt with Zeraora specifically, definitely sort of the best, counterplay option we have to this new tier 0 deck. So that's definitely going to be really relevant. You're going to want to play Bellibolt if you're not playing Suicune and Baxcalibur, or you could play Altaria high roll and probably have a decent shot. Look at this, guys. A 58% win rate into Hydreigon so far this season. So again, a big reason why not many people are playing Hydreigon is because they're swapping to Suicune and Baxcalibur. Suicune and Baxcalibur does quite well into Hydreigon and Absol, which is a really, really, really big deal. A massive deal, quite frankly, which is just kind of crazy. But that's what's going on this season. Again, and we didn't see a lot of Hydreigon this past weekend. A lot of people think it's because of Ice Pop, but I think also Hydreigon's just not nearly as well positioned this season as it was previously, and I think that's very, very relevant. Anyway, also kind of a losing matchup into Magnezone here, more Altaria. It does beat Meowscarada quite handedly. Unfortunately, Meowscarada, although good into Hydreigon, loses to virtually everything else this season, which is unfortunate. Also, losing matchup into Bellibolt Magnezone, which again makes sense. Anything Bellibolt should have a really good matchup into Suicune. It's just kind of perfectly positioned to be able to beat Suicune's, like turn 2, 140, like Suicune's deleted, So it's very, very relevant. Also doing good into Charizard, doing really good into Suicune and Greninja. So this is another really big reason why people are swapping to Chien-Pao in Baxcalibur, is because it actually just beats Suicune and Greninja, which is a massive, massive deal. So because these two decks are very similar, people are going to choose to play the version that beats the other version. So that's what we're seeing right now. Suicune and Greninja not only gets obliterated by Bellibolt, but also loses to Chien-Pao. Two big reasons why I think Suicune Baxcalibur is becoming the new premier strategy. Good matchups into Gourgeist, really good into Golden Go decks, because Golden Go is just not that good. Winning matchups into Blaziken, winning matchup a little bit more slightly into Gardevoir, a losing matchup, I guess, into Houndstone, which is pretty funny. And all of these are like small sample sizes, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to I guess, review them. But the big truth about Suicune and Excalibur is it is kind of the new meta driver. It's the new gatekeeper. This is a deck that has some specific counterplay, so I don't think it'll kind of run out of control, but it does basically stomp all of the non-meta decks in the metagame, which is kind of sad. So it's going to be very difficult, like I said, to play anything that's not considered a true meta deck and to beat Suicune and Excalibur. This is the #1 gatekeeper, again, of this new season. So a ton of people will play it. It just automatically beats like decks that aren't really top tier decks. And that's always a little bit difficult, but it's just so strong. Suicune is so consistent. And the cool thing about Suicune and Excalibur is it's not really a high roll deck. Suicune is very much like a tempo consistent deck. It's just about, the turn 3s and turn 4 consistencies that Suicune does extremely well. So again, Bellibolt beats it. Altaria, Greninja does fairly well into it. Magnezone beats it and stuff. But other than that, like there's really not much you're going to be able to find to compete into Suicune and Excalibur, other than, of course, learning the mirror matchup. Next up, let's take a look at Hydreigon. Again, very much on the decline. It does have a 52% win rate this season, but if you take a look at all of the most recent tournaments, it actually has been struggling quite heavily. I know some people are going to look at this and say, oh, that's not even a bad win rate. Trust me, if you take a look at all of the most recent tournaments over the past day or two, Hydreigon has been struggling very, very much. And we can kind of see this if you take a look at the best finishes. Right now, it is March 2nd as I record this. All of the top finishes for Hydreigon were on the first and or second day of the season, and since then it hasn't really done much. Right here, third at a 100-player tournament, but every other high placement for Hydreigon has been only at the very beginning of the season. So again, this is a deck that's trending very, very low. Very bad matchup into Suicune Excalibur. Very, very bad into Altaria Greninja. Actually, a little bit of a winning matchup right here into Bellibolt and Zeraora, which is relevant. It does still beat Suicune and Greninja, beats Magnezone, of course, beats Magnezone, of course, beats Magnezone, of course, and loses here pretty hardly, actually, to Meowscarada. So Meowscarada doing its job, quite frankly. Shout out to Meowscarada. It's good into Hydreigon, but can't really beat anything else. Luckily, though, we have Suicune Excalibur, we have Altaria. I think that this matchup into Bellibolt also is kind of like false data. I really don't think that matchup is that bad at all. I think that these are just a lot of maybe suboptimal Bellibolt decks, because I think Bellibolt actually has a pretty decent matchup in Hydreigon. I think by the end of the season, this is probably going to be about 50-50. I think both of these decks are very, very even into each other. But yeah, I really think that the reign of tyranny for Hydreigon is kind of on the out. In the writing's on the wall here. Some of the most popular decks in the metagame just really do beat it pretty handedly. Not good win rates at all for Hydreigon into Suicune Excalibur or Altaria and Greninja, which means that, to be fair, it's just really not a well-positioned deck. And I think that, again, a lot of people said that, because we banned Ice Pop, Hydreigon wasn't relevant, but go take a look at any other tournament this season so far recently, and you'll see the same effect here. It's just not a kind of metagame to Hydreigon. The meta has changed, new decks have approached, and the matchups for Hydreigon have changed pretty dramatically. So very interesting to see. Mega Altaria and Greninja here, almost 10% of the metagame here. Another whopping 53.5% win rate. Very, very good for Altaria and Greninja. This deck list is insane. Let's take a look at these finishes, right? First place here, March 1st. First place on March 2nd. Second place, March 1st. First place, March 1st. A lot of recent placements here. This is going to be a very, very solid deck this season. Let's take a look at the matchup spreads. Probably going to be very RNG based, but you know what? It is what it is. A little bit of a winning matchup into Suicune and Excalibur, nothing crazy. Very, very good, though, into Hydreigon. Very slightly good here into Bellibolt. Loses, though, to Magnezone, which kind of does make a little bit of sense. Loses to Oricorio. This is still a deck that just does not love to play against Oricorio. Unfortunately, Greninja here just doesn't have access to water energy, so you can never really attack with it, which means that Oricorio can kind of wall Altaria pretty easily, which is kind of crazy. And it loses to Chingling as well, which is kind of sad. Beats Meowscarada, though, and still beats Greninja Suicune, which, again, I think a big reason for that is the, just the inclusion of Chingling in this deck. But all of these matchups here, the data is pretty small so far, so not really worth taking a look at. But again, pretty even into Suicune and Excalibur, I would say. Definitely a little bit favored if you're playing Chingling, I would say. Definitely good into Hydreigon, which is cool. A little bit favored into Bellibolts, but not Oricorios or Magnezone, so that's relevant. Very, very relevant for Mega Altaria and Greninja, but it's going to be a top deck this season. It's going to remain the second or third most played deck. Bellibolt might surpass it, but Hydreigon will most definitely fall below Altaria and Bellibolt as the season goes on in terms of overall play rate. So that's going to be really important as well. Are you guys interested in this data? We're breaking it all down here. This is the real stuff here. This is the truth. So if you guys want the reality of what's happening right now, if you guys want to stay updated, this is what we're doing here. Again, I know it's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of data, but you got to try to follow along. All right. Lastly, though, before we wrap up this video, let's talk about Bellibolt, because Bellibolt and Zeraora here, again, doing very well. 8.5% of the meta share, 52.64% win rate. So 1% lower than Altaria and Greninja and Suicune and Baxcalibur, but I really think that the Bellibolt Zeraora decks have yet to been completely refined, so hopefully we kind of settle on a top tier deck list for this particular strategy. But very good placements here all across the board. Bellibolt hasn't won a lot of tournaments. As you've seen, it actually hasn't won anything yet, but has a very, very high average win rate, which is very interesting. Very, very interesting that a deck list like this hasn't gotten first place yet, but you also got to keep in mind, it's not nearly seeing as much play as some of the other decks, so that's probably a pretty big reason. But let's take a look at these matchup spreads here. Very, very good. 123-79 into Suicune Baxcalibur. So again, I think that this will be the true anti-meta strategy to beat Suicune and Baxcalibur. It just is good into the matchup, and I think that's going to be extremely relevant. Struggling a little bit into Hydreigon so far this season, struggling a little bit into Altaria and Greninja so far this season, and absolutely mops the floor with Suicune and Greninja. So two of the top new strategies basically just completely take or just get dominated by Bellibolt and Suicune and Baxcalibur, which is pretty funny. We are struggling into Magnezone Oricorio, which kind of makes sense, I think, a little bit. You know, Oricorio here, we only really play Zeraora in the deck list, so Zeraora can't 1-hit KO Oricorio. Does make that matchup a little bit tricky for sure. Struggling into Altaria. Good into Charizard, good into Magnezone Bellibolt, good into Meowscarada, good into Bellibolt Magnezone, struggling with Houndstone, which is really funny, struggling with Altaria. And I think that any Altaria deck playing Chingling is probably going to be really good into Bellibolt, especially the Zeraora version, because you're playing, you're playing Elemental Switches, you're playing Pokeball, you're playing Electric Generators, you're playing a lot of tool cards in the deck that are kind of crucial to the overall strategy, especially with Zeraora. Like, you need those basics on the bench. So getting locked out of Pokeball is going to be a really, really big deal. Again, guys, a very, very strong deck list. Very, very volatile matchups, though. Very good into Suicune and Baxcalibur, but struggling into some other stuff. I don't think this Hydreigon stuff will really matter much as the season goes on, but your matchups into Altaria are going to be pretty tricky. Again, just getting around the old Chingling stuff is going to be tough for a deck playing so many item cards. But this matchup here into Suicune and Baxcalibur will carry this deck throughout the season. This is going to be a number 1 or number 2 or number 3 most played deck. And again, I think its matchups into Suicune and Baxcalibur are going to be a very, very big reason for that. Okay, those are the 4 most premier decks so far this season in terms of their play rates. That doesn't mean other decks aren't going to be meta viable or relevant throughout the season. We just don't necessarily have enough data to kind of get a proper idea of what's going to be relevant or, I guess, important as the weeks go on. I guess you could say that the Magnezone stuff with Oricorio is definitely going to be a lot better now, whether it's with Bellibolt or without. I think that Oricorio is always strong early in the seasons, especially since Hydreigon isn't seeing that much play. So keep your eye on Oricorio Magnezone for sure. I think that's going to be really important to, to kind of, to stay up to date on, quite frankly. And everything else, honestly, has been a little bit lackluster. The Leafeon Ogerpon deck is a good deck, though. So this is something that definitely could rise back up. I don't think anything else in the metagame is going to nearly be as popular as these 4 top decks. And really, I think Hydreigon's going to be on the out. It'll probably end up 4th or 5th, which means that really we're seeing, 2 or 3 top tier decks at the top of the season. It's going to be Suicune Baxcalibur. It's going to be Altaria to some degree, and then Bellibolt to some degree. Those are the 3, top tier strategies. And I think Hydreigon has the potential to stick around. I just don't think it'll be as big of a deal as those other 3 decks. So that's kind of what we're seeing right now. That's the trend. Bellibolt's on the rise. Altaria Greninja's probably going to stay. Suicune Baxcalibur definitely on the rise. Hydreigon on the decline. We'll see if Magnezone or Oricorio can remain throughout the season. If we go down, some of the other new stuff just really isn't that good. Golden Go, just again, I've said it so many times, this is just an RNG-based deck list, and it really just isn't that kind, or this metagame isn't that kind to decks like this. It's just not... It's not something I would recommend when it comes to like competing in tournaments, but because it's an RNG-based deck, it could pop off and win at any time, quite frankly. Altaria in any degree is going to be really good, so I think that this is definitely by far the most popular way to play Altaria, but whether you're playing Chingling or Gourgeist, Altaria is always going to be a really strong Pokemon. Blaziken struggling, so not very relevant. RIP to Blaziken. Meowscarada, like I said here, we can take a look at its matchups. Good into Hydreigon, but loses to effectively everything else that's popular this season. And this is sort of what we were kind of predicting with Meowscarada, unfortunately. It's actually really good into Suicune Greninja as well, which is so funny. And that's just the truth about Meowscarada. It's got a lot of issues. It's not a bad deck list, but a lot of the decks that are popular this season just do well into Meowscarada. So unfortunately, I don't think Meowscarada will really stick around unless Hydreigon rises back up somehow as the most played deck. It's just not really counter meta to anything super popular this season. If we go down here, like I said, Leafeon Ogerpon going to be very respectable. Blaziken Heatmore is actually doing quite well. So maybe there's something to talk about here. I think maybe Blaziken Heatmore has some real potential. Let's take a look here at its matchups. I guess there's not a lot of data here to take a look at. Of course, Auto wins into Meowscarada and has been doing good into Hydreigon, which is cool. But into everything else, the data is obviously very small, but not that relevant. So maybe Blaziken has an opportunity to be relevant as a fire type deck. And as we saw here, Gardevoir, 52.5% win rate so far this season. Not many people playing Gardevoir, but I do think Gardevoir has potential if Hydreigon isn't popular. Darkrai, Kangaskhan, also a deck that definitely has a ton of potential, quite frankly. So there's some things to keep our eye on here. I think this will be a top 3, top 4 deck metagame, which is pretty standard as far as it goes, but it's really cool that a lot of those decks at the top of the meta this season are going to be new strategies. So, for at least this month here, things are going to look a lot different than they have been in previous months, and that to me is always a good thing. I'm always really happy about that. Comment down below what you guys think, though, because I'm really curious to see what happens this upcoming weekend and really what changes throughout this week, because things are going to change around a lot, quite frankly. But we'll keep you updated throughout the entire thing. So in summary, guys, the results of our tournament this weekend were pretty cool. But again, Suicune Baxcalibur is going to be the guy. We have to prepare for it. You either play this deck or you counterplay this deck. It's going to be extremely, extremely popular. And I think once ranked comes around, it's going to be by far the most played deck. Although you probably will see a lot of Golden Go and funny stuff like that in the lower ranks. But at the higher ranks, Suicune Baxcalibur is him. That is the guy, okay? Understand it. This is the new meta. It's Suicune Baxcalibur. Learn to play against it, learn to counterplay it, or learn to play the deck list. That is my recommendation. And yeah, again, Hydreigon, I think still will be somewhat relevant. It's on the decline. So it's going to end up maybe 4th or 5th by the end of the season. We'll see. Altaria Greninja is still very toxic, very relevant. Bellibolt, super strong. Good into Suicune Baxcalibur. Probably going to end up around 3rd this season. Meowscarada, I don't think will stick around. Suicune Greninja is deleted from the game. Peace out, Suicune Greninja. We did not miss you. I think it's been like 5 seasons now where this deck was like top tier. So goodbye, Suicune Greninja. Magnezone hopefully sticks around. I love Oricorio. I want it to remain relevant. It's never going to be like that popular. Golden Go, never going to be that relevant in tournament meta play. Charizard, maybe. But I think Blaziken is Heatmore is something a little bit more interested in. Again, Altaria decks are going to be relevant. I think Leafeon Ogerpon is a good deck list. Gardevoir, Kangaskhan, all things that are definitely interesting. But that's the top of the metagame. That's what we're taking a look at right now. And that's what I think the metagame will be. So anyway, guys, that is the first Meta Monday of this new season. Again, guys, comment down below. There's going to be a lot of comments. First of all, there's going to be a lot of comments talking about, whether they liked the Ice Pop ban or not. I will say the intention of banning Ice Pop wasn't to eliminate certain strategies from the game. Ice Pop is not exclusive to any deck in the game. So by banning Ice Pop, the goal in doing that was to create a much more, balanced and I guess, less RNG filled environment to get an understanding of how these new decks perform. And I think that we achieved that to a really significant degree. So again, no regrets. I think banning Ice Pop was phenomenal. I think a lot of people had a really much better time playing in the tournament and watching the tournament. So that's the truth. I just think that banning Ice Pop was kind of the right thing to do. Now, it is important to note that this tournament coming up here, which you got to go register for, which is the PGL 30th anniversary tournament. This tournament has no bans, okay? So there's nothing restricted here. This is standard format. So there will be lucky Ice Pops, but again, as we just talked about throughout this video, the meta trends are the meta trends, and I think our tournament kind of reflected that anyway. But definitely play in this tournament. There's going to be no bans here, no PMP this next weekend. But definitely go and play. This is going to be a really big event. Now, for anybody curious, because there's been a lot of questions like, are we going to continue to ban Lucky Ice Pop in the future? If we were running PMPT next weekend, we might have still banned Ice Pop. I don't really know. It's hard to say because we're not running a PMPT tournament. But when PMPT comes back, which is going to be the tournament weekend after this upcoming weekend, it'll be alongside the release of this ranked season, which means that we will never be banning any cards when ranked season is out alongside the tournament. because there's no reason to have the tournament metagame be different from ranked as ranked is going on. So by the time PMPT tournaments come back, we will not have any bans, right? Because it'll be alongside ranked and the metagame will be the same as ranked. It'll be just no bans standard format. And you're going to have to prepare because even though the metagame has changed a lot, Lucky Ice Pop is going to be a super relevant card in ranked. It's just sort of a sometimes auto win card. So like, I think that if you're not playing Ice Pop in ranked, you're probably going to have a pretty tough time. So I would definitely recommend it. I think Lucky Ice Pop is going to be very popular in this upcoming weekend's tournament. It's just an absolutely broken card. Like whether you're playing it in Bellibolt or Altaria or Hydreigon or even Suicune, Lucky Ice Pop is an absolutely broken card and will likely end up seeing play in every deck this season. So stick around and find out. Next weekend here will definitely be where I think the metagame gets solidified and everything gets sort of fully settled. And then we'll kind of take all of that data from this upcoming weekend's massive tournament and we'll sort of use it to prepare for the upcoming ranked season. So there it is, guys. That's the Meta Monday. That's the video. Comment down below, let me know what you guys think. Thanks everybody for participating. Shout out to the judges, the casters, the moderators, everybody that makes the tournament happen. And again, definitely go register for the massive tournament this weekend and tune into the live streams because we're going to be casting it this weekend, which is going to be super, super exciting. All right, guys, let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.